I'd like to call to order the Charter Township of Chesterfield Regular Township Board Meeting for Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022, to order at 7 p.m. Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Barry, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Kersten.
Here.
Treasurer Elliott.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee DeMink.
Here.
Trustee Vosberg.
Here.
Clerk Barry is here.
I ask that Trustee Joseph be excused from tonight's proceedings and his name not be read. He did notify us that he would not be available tonight. Item 4, approval of agenda. Clerk Barry,
4A, approval of the agenda with addendum if necessary.
do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Support.
Motion by Clerk Barry, supported by Trustee Vosberg.
Support.
Elliott, I'm sorry. I look at the red lights, I'm sorry. Treasurer Elliott. Clerk Barry, call the roll.
Clerk Barry, aye. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 5, presentations. There are no presentations scheduled tonight. Item 6, department reports. I'll start out with the board members. Trustee Anderson? No? Clerk Barry?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just a very brief report from the clerk's office. We did receive the Board of Canvassers report for the August 2022 primary election, and Chesterfield Township had no deficiencies and all precincts were in balance. There will also be a community shred day that will occur this Thursday. Here at the township offices, members of the public are also allowed to bring, I believe it's 2 bags of, or 2 boxes of records if they would like them to be securely destroyed here at the township offices, where they can watch that happen so that their sensitive documents are not left out into the garbage. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Barry. There are no other department reports we'll provide tonight. Number 7, consent agenda.
All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of an item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda items are permitted. 7A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of August 9th, 2022. 7B, approval of the payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion
Support.
by Trustee DeMink, supported by Treasurer Elliott. Comments from the board?
Support.
Comments from the board? Comments from the public? Comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. In regards to the bill run, a couple questions for the board. Under facilities and operations, DTE Energy, I noticed that there was a bill for $6935.15 under 101-265-920.001. It was the only bill in that roll that was out of whack. Everything else went from $42.75 to $264.34, but this one here was $6,939.15 at 47275 Sugar Bush. So if somebody can give me an explanation on how we've got, why that bill is so high and what it functions to take care of, I'd appreciate it. I notice under the bill run, we had $30,359 that went to our election workers. I'd like to thank all the election workers who participated in democracy on August 2nd. Under the treasurer's office, it's good to see our treasurer back at this meeting. I think she was out of town on the last one. I noticed that there were two charges, one for 6:30 for an APT US&C Conference for $798, and on 7/5 for Spirit Airlines for $494. So maybe we can get an update. I'd like to get an update from the treasurer on what that conference was about. We're running with a annual budget deficit, so I was just wondering if there was any way that we could have, went someplace here in the state instead of flying out of state. Under facilities and operations on 720, this charge here is a little puzzling to me. It was CVS Glass and Mirror. It was a replacement of an entry door and glass for $1,370. And what makes this puzzling to me is that glass that was replaced was damaged by one of our contractors, Ultima Lawn and Care. So Ultima Lawn and Care would be responsible to pay that $1,370. And why are the residents being fleeced on $1,370? They should be paying that charge. So I'd like to see that removed from the bill run, and I'd like to see them pay that instead of, the residents picking up that charge. Under Department and Administrative Services, on 729, I noticed that there was overnight shipping for a township magazine for $32.31. I mean, what was so important that it had to be overnight for a township magazine? Facilities and operations, again, the $58.97 for the janitorial services. Thank you.
Further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public? No further comments from the public. I have a motion by trustee Demink, supported by treasurer Elliott to approve. My apologies, treasurer Elliott.
There was a question about my attendance to a conference. It was held out of state. It was the annual conference. It was held by the public treasurers of the U.S. and Canada. I will be receiving a reimbursement scholarship for that attendance of $499. While I was there at the last board meeting, I studied and took a test, and I am now a certified public funds investment manager and certified by the Association of Public Treasurers of the United States and Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, treasurer Elliott. Further comments from the board? Seeing none, I have a motion by trustee Demink, supported by treasurer Elliott to approve the consent agenda as read. Clerk Berry?
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 8A. Clerk Berry?
Item 8A is to conduct a public hearing for the August 23rd, 2022 Regular Township Board Meeting at 7 p.m. to hear comments concerning the estimate of costs to provide police and fire protection as determined by the Township Board, and also on the distribution of the special assessment levy for said police and fire protection.
So moved.
A motion by trustee.
Support.
Supported by treasurer Elliott to open the public hearing at 7:08. Clerk Berry, would you call the roll?
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
This is a public hearing portion for the said public safety assessment. Just a quick comment before, this is not new. This is a reoccurring event that occurs annually before the spread of the assessment is posted and collected by the township. That being said, I'll open the public comment section of this meeting. Comments from the public?
Joe Kadich, 32825 Sutton. Joe Kadich, 32825 Sutton. Basically, I wanted to address, if I've done in past years, is this sad SAD assessment basically took any voting rights that the public had as to how much millage should be collected for the police fire protection. Happened about 4 years ago. I passed out a little blurb like how the whole thing happened. Essentially, a number of years ago, they got in trouble because property values dropped, and with it, the resulting millage dropped too. So the police department is in trouble. They did a number of things to try and keep the police department going. They borrowed $3 million from the general fund. They brought in, I think, a $50,000 study that offered a number of ways to reduce the costs in the police department. Didn't do any of those things. And then finally, they adopted this sad thing. Basically, the voters had no voice in it. The board introduced this whole thing. Basically, what it allowed them to do was the millage and the money they were collecting, they could pool it all and use it at their discretion. The reason they wanted it is because there was $10 million in the police, or excuse me, in the fire equipment fund. And they've thrived on that since that all occurred, probably, what, 2017? Now, the fire equipment fund, that was $10 million. Some of it went to the fire equipment, maybe 2 or 3 million. The balance of it went to support the police department. That fund expired this past year. And now here we are still talking about more money for the police department. Now the money's coming in, a mill, back then used to get about $1.5 million. Now it gets over $2 million. So they can still stay with saying, we're only gonna charge you $8 million. But they don't tell you, basically, that during that time, they didn't repay the loan to the general fund. But they added, basically, 13 people to the police rolls. And they created a public safety director office that's got 4 people. That's costing you about a little over $500,000. So they're keeping it at 8 mils, but 8 mils now brings in about $2 million a mill. There's a lot more money being spent here than you realize. They're being good guys saying we're not going to charge you any more mills for this, but they've added to the police force. None of the ads to the police force ever came through this board and somebody said, this is what justifies it. Never happened. People just came through here and they kept being added. The only 2 that I know that were justified were the 2 that they said were for traffic control. Other than that, nothing. It's time for this board to look at that, give this back to the public. The only way it's going to happen is that the board has to agree that to go back to the millage, and it'll be voted on in the future whether you want increased millage if they need more money or not. Right now, you don't have any say in it. They can increase this millage with the way it's set up, another 2 mils, from 8 mils to 10 mils, without any authority from you people. And it's coming out of your pocket. The only other way you can do that if they don't vote to go back to a regular millage is to get a petition going. That's about it. Other than that, you don't have any control over how much money comes into there or how it's spent. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. As a resident, taxpayer, homeowner, and a candidate running for supervisor, this is a top priority in the Speaka administration. My concern was when I looked at the 23 police and fire public safety budget, it showed that we're running a negative $288,620.91. Public safety is a top priority. My concern comes in, which I don't think a lot of the residents understand. We've got what's called an inter-fund service transfer. So if you look at police and fire, There's, for the fire department, it's $107,267.99, and for the police department, it's $160,902. So what it is, the residents are taxed for their property taxes at 7.95. So the residents on that 7.95, that money, the residents think that all that money is, goes to, that's allocated, goes to the police department, which it does. But the problem is a portion of that money, which again, that inter-fund service transfer, which used to be called administrative service fees, and I want to thank the treasurer for the name change. That was pretty good, changing it from administrative service fees to the inter-fund service transfers, because it doesn't sound like a fee at that point. But we're taking money out of both departments and transferring that money to the general fund. So we're taking it out of public safety, out of police and fire, and we're putting it in the general fund to plug other holes in the township. And I have a problem with that, because, the residents want that money used for the police department, where it should stay, and they want it used for the fire department. That's where that money should stay. It should not be going to the general fund to plug other holes. So that's an issue, and that issue will be addressed. So I guarantee I will address that issue. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
So I guarantee I will address that issue. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
Mike Horton, 50393 Bauer. In addressing the public safety millage in its renewal, you have to look into considerations as to why it is, whether or not we are allocating the resources in the best way possible. Within it, it is evident that one of the most important priorities, if not the most important priority of any local governance, is in public safety. And public safety has two sides, that being that of police and fire protection. Without a doubt, both are critical, especially in the growing uncertainties of today's era. But it is also without a doubt that as times have changed, local governments have become more reliant on their citizenry to provide for those resources to make sure that both departments within public safety are adequately funded, maintained, and manned. This being said, I think that the expansion within the Chesterfield Police Department has been effective in helping curtail an increase in crime nationwide as occurred over the past few years, especially in the post-pandemic world, for our growing community. But that being said, since it is a growing community, it is worth noting the lack of growth within the fire department that has occurred. Since 2000, the population of this township has increased about 30%, and yet the full-time fire department has not increased any personnel. It has remained the same full-time personnel for suppression within its ranks. Aside from that, it is not on parity with the other side of public safety, which is the police, in which what I mean by that is that when comparing the police department to the fire department, there are clear differences, being the difference in full-time and part-time, and in retirement ages, and essentially a focus on what the community is investing in. So if that is the case, we have seen the expansion within the police department. Will we see any future expansion within our fire department? As NFPA standards require, or suggestion would be 1.54 firefighters per 1,000 residents. Obviously, that is overkill in our community, especially since we don't provide any ALS services. But even if you were to go off of half of that, it would still be a significant increase in the manpower. 1.54 individuals per the current 1,000 residents times 46. It ends up being around 75-ish personnel. That's way too much, but even if you shoot for, say, half that, it would still be a significant increase. Undoubtedly, though, I think that it would be very wise to expand full-time suppression aspects of the fire department and essentially treat it as a public safety department where both sides are treated in good conduct with each other. Otherwise, it does look like a lopsided public safety department. Thank you.
Further comments from the public? Further comments from the public? Further comments from the public? Further comments from the public?
I'm Mike Fleury, 30015 Danvers Drive. Before I bought my condo here about 3.5 years ago, I used a website called Smart Asset to estimate my property taxes based on the zip code and the state equalized value. To my surprise, when I got my paperwork from the mortgage company, it was about double that. According to the Michigan Department of Treasury, the estimate tax currently is $5,154 based on 2020 millage rates. I'm super nervous. In the fine print, I noticed that rates include special assessments levied on the millage basis for Chesterfield Township, plus additional assessments for police, fire, and EMS services. These assessments have taken on the appearance of general property taxes and have blurred the lines between the assessments and general property taxes, especially to the public, and in doing so have tempered the shift of the financial burden from businesses to homeowners. These additional revenues were originally directly benefit the public with capital improvements. I don't think it should be used for general government responsibilities like police and fire services. If our property taxes are not sufficient to meet demands, we should explore other revenue options instead of putting the burden on the homeowners in Chesterfield Township. In 1978, the Headley Amendment became law, and it states that any new taxes or even an increase in tax rates will require voter approval. Unfortunately for the taxpayers, as communities neared their maximum general property tax limitations, communities have used these special assessment levies to get around the tax limitations. Although it is perfectly legal, it just doesn't seem right to the people of Chesterfield Township. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the public? I'll make a motion to, or I will call it up to the board. I'll make a Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. First thing, everybody take a gasp or take a deep breath, because I believe the rate's going to stay at 7.95 mils. It's not going to increase. Your local government, any government, has to provide for the public's safety. You need your police, you need your fire. We need to be safe. That's our number one mission up here. That's one of the reasons you indirectly put us here. I have an opportunity to talk with our finance director. She kind of enlightened me on some of the, if you actually have a copy of the budget, I don't know if did they supply that to the public? Or line items? An issue I have, and I brought it up before, so it's not new. We're looking at collecting $15,245,000. You look at the top line there. You look at expenditures, and at the bottom, the deficit's going to be $288,000 short. Years ago, we used to have a fund equity. We had a rainy day fund in the police department. About $5 or $6 million was there, get us through rough times. That's been gone for a while. I'm not going to get into the history of the SAD operation, how that came about, but I do want to talk about the budget. As you go line for line, you start looking at things, and this has been an issue. In your police, before we had the SAD, when the police and fire were separate, starting, I know I have figures from, and I got them from a reputable source, starting in 2001, $20,000 was taken out of the police budget as a interfund transfer, it's called now, and put in the general fund. That's gone on continuously. As of 2017, it was projected at $2.5 million being taken out of the police fund over that period of time. It's probably close to $3 million now. This year now, we're looking at $160,000, and on the next page, it's going to be transferred out of what you're paying for public safety on the police side. It'll be transferred probably into the general fund. There's also additional costs, which I understand, of about $52,000 taken out of police budget for the building that'll go to our field and operations to cut the grass, remove the snow and stuff like that. So that'll be dumped in. There's also something that's interesting. That building over there in Continental is paying out of their budget $126,000 lease to the township. All right? I just find that somewhat interesting, and that's, when you look at the fire side, there's similar figures that are taken out of, which is also public safety. Interdepartment servants transfers, $107,000 out of what you pay that goes into the fire budget that'll somehow get back into the general fund. Again, building and grounds, maintenance, et cetera, probably $30-some thousand there. And a very interesting thing, it probably went back to when you had 3 separate millages you paid for police and fire equipment. Fire equipment could not be used for personnel, for your pay, had to be for equipment. This may be something left over from there. In this year's budget, the 2023 budget, if you go down and look at the last page, the fire department, out of the budget you pay for, the money you pay for fire, is paying $116,000 for hydrant rental. Those rentals out there, that's for this year. All I'm saying is, and I know I was told that, yes, the board can look at these things, yes, they can be adjusted, et cetera. I hope as these budgets, that we revisit them during the year, that this board does in fact start looking at, keep that money where it belongs. Tighten up where it should. And I'm not gonna, I'd much rather have, I'll tell you, I'd rather have a scout car instead of a kayak. That's my feeling right now. There's things here that are nice, but we have to look at what's first here. You're probably looking at $700,000 or $800,000. I didn't add it up. You can do it. That is coming out for one thing or another. And there's another group called contractual services, if you look at it. That is a big hunk coming out of both the fire and the police department. I was told that's some pre-existing thing, so I'm not going to touch that, but I just am concerned about all these little pieces that are plucked out of what you pay for your police and fire, and it ends up in the general fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Berry, would you, Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. The clerk's office is in receipt of 3 letters of protest as prescribed by the notice of the public hearing. Those 3 letters of protest are on file in the clerk's office, and I'd ask the board would receive and file those.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Clerk Berry,
Support.
supported by Trustee. No, they're not. Trustee Bossberg, did you support that? Okay. Clerk Berry, would you call the roll? I have a motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Trustee Bossberg, to close the public hearing.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 9A.
Item 9A is approval to establish the estimate of cost to provide police and fire protection as determined by the Township Board and the amount of special assessment levy, as well as direct the Township Supervisor to spread the assessment levy on the taxable value of all lands and premises within the district for the year 2023 and adopt resolution number 2022-25.
Do I have a motion to approve item 9A?
Motion to adopt resolution number 2022-25.
Supported by Trustee Vosberg. Comments from the board? Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I approve this and the budget that was presented. These are numbers that are provided by Public Safety. They are the ones who know what they're doing to operate. And there were comments about service fees or transfers, whatever we want to call them, but what they are is services that are provided by general fund employees or contracts. And if the purpose of that is if the fire and police were a standalone department, they would have to have their own building, their own attorney, their own everything, and we're able to share at a cost saving. So, and it is not only allowed but an encouraged practice by public accountants who are familiar with public government accounting. So there's nothing odd or unusual or incorrect or even questionable about this budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Treasurer Elliott?
In following up on why we don't refer to them as administrative fees anymore, we did ask Plant Moran when they were here if there was a better name, is because by referring to them as administrative fees, it was creating some confusion because there used to be something called an administrative fee on the tax bill. That is not what this was. These are essentially one fund is transferring to another fund. So the Plant Moran said sometimes they're called fund service transfer funds or whatever, this name that we're now calling it. So that way we didn't have confusion by calling them two different things, administrative fees. So that's why they are called that. And as Trustee Vosberg has referred to, they are normal accounting practice that has been going on for years. I think that the finance director maybe can give us a little more clarity. She also has a formula that, in reference to that, it's greatly discounted from what the normal fee would be. But she's the expert on that, and I'll let you go ahead and do your presentation. From what the normal fee would be, but
Trustee Anderson.
she's the expert on that.
Thank you, sir. Just a couple, one more comment, two comments here. I'll support this budget, and I hope that this board looks at it, these fees and that. A quick thing, I talked to a former chief of our police department about these administrative fees. The chief told me at that time, we could in-house take care of our payroll, but instead it is done by the general workers, and they get a bill for that. It's quite maybe hefty. A couple of us asked to see what the product of work that is done for the police department, or in this case, the fire department coming up here. Maybe in the future we'll see it. I've yet to see anything to tell me that this clerk worked X number of hours doing the budget for the police department, or the fire department, or water and sewers. It's a very general, non-substantiated, floating thing. I've yet to see any work on it. Maybe we'll see something coming up here. I understand there might be changes, but up to this point, it's just the money's here and gone. It goes in the general fund, and the general fund clicks along. Anyhow, thank you.
Clerk Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just to address concerns, all letters of protest have not been read into the record in the past. We simply record the name and the address, but those letters are available to the public upon request and file in the clerk's office. Also, with regards to this item, I think it says a great deal about the great work that's done by the administration in the Public Safety Department. I think our new Public Safety Director, Director Bassett's done an outstanding job of being able to keep costs low so that this is the same rate of taxation that we have had for the last 3 years. Even though costs have gone up, everyone knows the cost of groceries have gone up, cost of transportation has gone up, cost of everything has gone up about 20% across the board. Cost of elections, printing, paper, that we've seen that ourselves, has gone up 20%. And the fact that we are able to keep the rate at the same rate it was, despite the incredible inflation and an increase in costs, I think is a tremendous testament to how efficient Director Bassett is running our Public Safety Department, and I want to thank him for that, and therefore I'll be supporting this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Many things were said here. Again, reciting history. This is consistent with what has been done since the SAD was instituted. It has created the foundation for the Public Safety Department to stabilize itself, both on the police and fire side. There's been expansions across the board in the police and fire department. There's been numerous capital improvements out of this SAD that has allowed the public safety to grow and expand, and will continue to do so. With this board's past approval and agreement that this SAD was the best way to go to fund public safety, police and fire. In regards to admin fees and capital fees that have been charged, I historically in my previous role as police chief did not like them and still do not like them, and look forward to refining them as we move forward. The township as a whole, one of the projects that I instituted right off the bat was expand a BSNA software in here that allows real-time live interaction, budget creation, capital improvement plans, which has will charge those funds accordingly when that employee works within that department, and we will refine that. And also at the last board meeting where we asked Platt Moran to come in and help us with policies and protocols to how properly manage and some of these fees. Are they proper? Are they historical? Are they just past practice? Are they good accounting practices? And we approved that, and that interaction with Platt Moran, our auditor, is going to work in the future. We're going to develop that. We're going to refine these. So I stand by what I said historically. Unfortunately, Rome's not built in one night, and we will continue to do that. But what I will guarantee everyone here is the draft budget that you see on display tonight is a draft budget. We are continuing to refine it. The Public Safety Department is financially sound, stable, and functioning. We will invest every opportunity dollar that we can. We'll maximize it, and we will provide this township with the best public safety that we can and be cognizant of the money that the residents provide us. So with that being said, Director Bauer, is there anything you would like to add to this? Did I miss anything, or?
Not really. I just had a quick thing of, that this is the 2023 public safety estimate of cost. It is based on 7.95 mils. Last year's public safety mills was also 7.95. Therefore, there is no increase in the millage being requested. The 7.95 is estimated to bring in $15,245,324, or approximately 93.2% of total anticipated revenue. The expenditures shown are just an estimate of cost. The other income and expenditures shown are based on an average of 3% increase from the approved 2022 budget. The actual 2023 budget for public safety will be presented and approved with the township budget in whole. So there is, as the board knows, because we go through this every year, a lot of work that goes into the annual budget. This is something that is required by the SAD to have simply an estimate of cost. The numbers here on the breakout or the line items are not what the budget will end up being. Because at this point, we're still in the process of going through each department. Director Bassett's going through, looking and analyzing all of his line items, making sure that he has a good presentation. The board will have many, many bites at the apple of talking about it and understanding what everything is. So I hope that there is never a time that a board member ever feels like they don't understand something, because they are more than welcome to come in and see spreadsheet upon spreadsheet of stuff. And so during this budget time, we're going to go through all of the budget for all of the township, including public safety, and going over stuff like the payments that were brought up for leases. It's not just an arbitrary, hey, let's transfer money over to general fund for building rental. That's actually, the public safety department had a bond that they took out, and that's just repaying the bond. Dollar for dollar, doesn't make any money, it's just a repayment of the bond for the improvements. So we go over all of that in a lot of detail. But this tonight is just simply the estimate of cost for the SAD, showing that we do need the 7.95 mils.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public? Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
I hear everybody talking about we're still at 7.95 mils, but nobody's understanding that 7.95 mils brings you a hell of a lot more money than it did 3 years ago when it was 7.95 money. And instead of basically saving the police department, making it what it should be, keeping it maybe 40, 45 people, you expanded it by 35%. So the additional money coming in for the 7.95 mils that now bring in 15 million allowed you to do something. And instead of owning up and say, okay, maybe now we only need 6.75 mils or 95 mils. I didn't see that happen. It's like whatever we got coming in, we're going to spend. And I hate like hell to have it happen like it happened 4 years ago when we get into another downturn as we did in 2014. And you're going to be coming out there saying, oh, we need more money because we got all this expense in our police and fire department. But you have an out for that. You can add 2 mils without public knowledge or even bidding on it or even saying anything on it. This is wrong. You guys are just taking advantage of the money coming in the public instead of doing a good job providing the police department you need, not the police department you want. In the sheet I packed out, I looked at what Washington or Macomb Township did for their police department. There are 90,000 people in that township. We're 45. They go with the sheriff's department, which is what suggested we do back when we were in trouble. It cost them $5.8 million for police protection. They have 32 officers. And you don't hear anything coming out of that township crying that crime's out of control, everything's happening, we've got no police protection. They're not doing any worse or any better than we are here, and we're paying twice as much as they are. It's a shame. Thank you. It's a shame. Thank you.
John, Speaker 53978 Connor Drive. What I heard was a lot of, well, this has been going on for years with the interfund service transfers. But again, if you listen to what Trustee Anderson said, they started at $20,000 and started gradually growing year by year. So a $20,000 administrative fee at the time that is now an inter-fund service transfer is now $160,000 for the police department and $107,000 for the fire department. That money, even though it's been going on for years, it's wrong. We need to correct it and we need to fix it. And again, that money, when it gets pulled out of police and fire, takes away from police training, police equipment, and any additional staff and overtime that we may need for any particular event. Again, I can't stress how important it is. This problem needs to be fixed, and it will get fixed. So this, I will address this problem. We talked about $1,108,083 in other income. We never talked about what the specifics were of the $1,000,001 in other income. So I'm curious, because nothing was listed as far as specifics. I was wondering if Vicki could comment on that and tell me what the breakup, what that $1,000,001 consists of. So again, you know, public safety is a top priority in the Speaker administration. It will always be a top priority, and I take it very seriously, and I will address it. Thank you.
Further comments from the public? I'll bring it back up to the board. No further comments from the public. Trustee Mink.
Mr. Kadich talks about manpower, things at the police department. Mr. Kadich, you were an engineer for Ford Motor. I don't know what you know about police work, but I guarantee you Brad and I know a lot more about it than you. And the environment has changed. I've got 46 years in the business. Every department has added manpower. The climate has changed. The scenes have changed. People have changed. Crime is going rampant all over. You might not see it, but I see it. I know Brad sees it. Trustee Anderson sees it because he's part of, he communicates with his old comrades. We added people. We need people. That's why we got dogs. We got special units. You got SWAT. You got to have it because you don't know when a bad situation is going to happen. So when you want to talk about police work, you better be well educated. You're an engineer for Ford or retired from Ford. Yep, you got that. I'll admit that. You know more than that than me. But for police work, I guarantee I know a lot more about it, and so does Brad, and so does Hank.
Further comments from the board? Further comments? Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So I think we've addressed the interfund service transfer question. I believe the supervisor has addressed it and said that he'll be looking at that, and it'll, we have a new upgraded software called BSNA, and that software is able to dial down services provided and hours worked, unlike anything we've ever had before. So this was one way that we did in the past was to be able to pay for, and I'll throw myself out there, the treasurer's office. The treasurer's office not only collects your taxes, and your property taxes are what is funding your general fund. So you pay it out of one bucket or the other, right? But you're paying for your police services. You're paying for your treasurer to be able to collect for the schools. You're paying for us to be able to collect for the SAD. You're paying to be able to do the lawn cutting and the park maintenance and to make sure that the clerk can run the elections. Those are all of the general services that you're paying for regardless. Which bucket they're coming out of, there's nothing wrong with the way that accounting does it. That's what we're telling you, is that Plant Moran has looked at it. We have run this by them several times because it comes up every year. And this is very standard accounting practices. So one of the things that Brad had a vision for, Supervisor Kersten had a vision for, was to be able to dial it down and say exactly how much is it and what is the formula. So we have Plant Moran coming in to this month to talk about what exactly is the formula that is the best formula and how to dial that down. So there's really, that's not necessarily the agenda. The other part that is in support of what Trustee Domingue is saying, the other question that's being brought up is this question that's an age-old question here is, do you want to have your own police department or do you want to have a sheriff's department? That is another question that has come up over and over and over again. For the majority of the people in this community, it has been that they have said they wanted their own police department. We are not Macomb Township, right? Macomb Township doesn't have an expressway going through it, doesn't have a major fairway like the Gratiot going through it, doesn't have 23 Mile. There's a lot of different factors, and I think that's what Trustee Domingue is speaking to. This is one of the things that we have to look at when you look at the crime rates here and you look at Macomb Township. So these are questions that we're not asking today. Today we're looking at the estimated costs, and we're saying right now this is the way we've been doing it. And do we support the estimate of cost, and do we support this agenda item here today the way that it is? Some of these other questions about are philosophical questions, whether you want your police department or sheriff's department. And I think for the majority of the people, that question has been answered several times, that they are very pleased with our police department. I am very happy with the police department and personally, and do support our police department, and will continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Beard. Oh, Trustee Anderson. Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Just, I agree with Trustee Domingue in one area as far as man, woman power, specialization this day and age we live in. Our demands are unique here compared to Macomb Township. We have I-94, runs the width of our community. You have Gratiot, major trunks. A lot of these other communities don't have those problems that come with those things. We have things coming from other communities that end up through Chesterfield that don't start here, but our law enforcement and our fire has to handle it. I think that's another reason why these various, I can see you want your buildings to look good. They need to be as far as maintained and the grass cut. Yeah. But these slashes of hunks of money out of that, when you start adding up out of the police and fire budget, what's taken out, whatever we want to call them, still is close to $700,000 a year coming out of your budget. I personally would rather see that go towards better training for our law enforcement and I'm sure we got good people to start with, more training. Perhaps the old story, fire. There's issues about the old fire station on Forbes and Jefferson. That doesn't mean we should build one, but maybe look at that, see how we can enhance what we have. Use this money that you're paying for that instead of wherever it goes for buying postage stamps, I don't know, whatever, to the general fund, and let the general fund take care of itself. I'll let it go right there. Thank you.
Clerk Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just a couple points of clarification that I heard some confusion about. I think it's important we clarify them. First and foremost, the difference between a millage structure and a special assessment district structure. I was on the board when we made that change, and the reason I supported that change is because a special assessment district structure of financing allows for more public input than a millage structure does. The millage structure, if it's approved by voters 20 years ago, if you moved in the last 20 years, you have no say in that. None whatsoever. It just keeps getting collected every year. There's also no opportunity to reduce that amount. Once an amount, say for 8 mills is approved, you have to spend the 8 mills on that, and you have no say in it. In a special assessment district, that is a sliding scale. Yes, it can go up, but it's also at the discretion of the board with input from the public as to what that rate is going to be. Also, there is no ability every year, like the special assessment district requires this hearing every single year. That gives the public the ability to have input into what that rate is going to be or what their thoughts are about that rate every single year. You don't have that under a millage structure. So it actually gives more control and more input from the public to have a special assessment district. So those are the difference between the two funding mechanisms. I know that for myself, I moved here 20 years ago, but I inherited the millage for the police, the fire, and the fire equipment. I had no say in that whatsoever, and I had no ability to change it as a taxpayer. The special assessment district, I have an opportunity every year to come and have my voice heard about what I think about the levy, and I can also protest it. You can't protest millage, you can protest the special assessment district. So it gives you more flexibility and more power to the taxpayers, and that's why I approved it, or why I supported it when we made the changeover. Also allowed for more efficiencies and various other things. Another benefit of this particular structure is that you find out what the estimate of costs are earlier in the year. Normally you have to wait until the budget process at the end of the year, and that's the only time you have an input in terms of how we spend the money. With this structure, you find out several months earlier. So again, gives more opportunity, more input from the public, more public participation. It gives more opportunity for that to say how this board spends our collective money. We all pay taxes here. So businesses do pay this as well. It's not just residential, so it's not like it overly burdens residential taxpayers. It actually, our businesses do pay the special assessment district if they're in the district, which is the entire township as well. So just wanted to make those clarification points. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Thank you. Just going to say that the SAD formulation back in 2017 created the best foundation for the public safety application in this township, not only for public safety, for the service, for the level of service that we provide, but also for the residents. It did reduce the taxable amount that the residents were charged for police, fire, and 911 services. So that being said, as long as I sit in this role, public safety will be a strong element within this township. We will fund it to its fullest capacity. We will provide all the tools necessary for police, fire, and our dispatch services. And on the same token, on the inside, we will monitor, manage, and address all administrative fees, service charges, or any other amount of money that goes to operate that. And obviously, it will be discussed at a public forum, much like this one, and in the future, in November, when the budget is finally presented. So with that being said, I have a motion by Clerk Berry supported by trustee Vosberg, to approve item 9A.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 9B.
Item 9B is a recommendation to approve a request by the Police Department to renew 911 service contract with current suppliers Carousel Industries, Motorola, and Fortinet with a 5-year total cost of $121,115.80.
So moved.
Support.
Motion by trustee Demink, supported by trustee Anderson. Director Bassett, if you want to address this service agreement?
Just real briefly, this is the same provider that we have been using for the last 6 years. That service contract has been effective for our operations. We're just simply asking to renew that for the coming 5 years. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Comments from the board? Trustee Demink? Anything?
I'm good.
Trustee Anderson? Anything? Comments from the public? No comments from the public. I'll bring it back up to the board. I have a motion by trustee Demink, supported by trustee Anderson, to approve item 9B. Clerk Barry.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Item 9C.
Item 9C is to approve payment for annual dues for the Michigan Townships Association in the amount of $7,978.59.
Move to approve.
Second.
Trustee Vosberg, supported by Clerk Barry. Director Duchesne, you want to address this, or do you want me to just do it from here? This is our MTA dues for the township. They're annual. What we've done is we went through and scoured the names. We removed some participants that were township employees that are no longer here. We updated the list. Am I missing anything? You want to speak to MTA and what it does for us?
I think for the board, it would be redundant, but overall for the public, it is a association that the majority of all townships in Michigan belong to. It advocates for the township. It advocates for training, provides classified advertising and exchange of information like all of our public organizations. It has an executive director. It has a board of directors that sets policy and direction for the association. And this motto, like all the other organizations that advocate for local government systems, it says there's strength in numbers. So that is the quick summary of the whole thing.
Just on a side note, we met the MTA president 2 weeks ago.
We did.
We are meeting with him again, and again, our mission will be to advocate for the township on several levels. So, comments? Any further comments? None. Comments from the public? No comments from the public? We're back up to the board. I have a motion by trustee Vosberg, supported by Clerk Barry, to approve item 9C. Clerk Barry.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 10, addendums. There are none. Item 11 is public comments. There's a 5-minute time limit. Please identify yourself for the clerk. For the record, the clock will start when you begin speaking.
Joe Kadich, basically, I'm going to try and keep it short, address a couple of things that, like Clerk Barry said, that the public has a choice in this matter. We can come and talk about everything that this sad budget allows. Yeah, we can talk. Nobody listens. At least when it's back and you need money and it's up for a vote, people have got a choice. Then you listen. Coming here and sitting here and listen to you say this is a great deal and whatever we say doesn't matter, it's not the way it should work. Brian, as far as your experience, I acknowledge you got a lot of experience. But when you add that many people, when you expand a department 35 people, or 15 people, basically any business looks at it and say, why do we need it? And it's presented. There's been no change in your crime stats that I could tell. Nothing. They're pretty much even the last number of years. You don't see what I see. Well, why don't you bring that out?
Because that stuff, some of those things I can't release. It's privileged information.
Okay, that's all I'm saying. There's a reason for expanding, you need policemen, tell us. So that's all should happen. The other thing I wanted to talk about is really disappointed with the performance of the water department when they came out with the boil water issue last Saturday. Heard nothing from anybody in this department. Didn't hear from Mitch, didn't hear from you. I found out about it. My neighbor, I was out shopping, and my neighbor came over in the afternoon and told me about it. So I shut the water off, boiled what I had, and that was it. But to me, that situation with that pipe broken and not knowing how much water was drawn in through that hole in that pipe that went into the system and came back out, and that's the reason they said shut it all down. They didn't know what was in the system that drew in from that pipe. Somebody should have been out here, as I suggested in the past. You have access to that Amber Alert. Everybody's got phones. That would have been nice to have an alert saying, this is happening, boil your water, and then come out with the information afterwards, instead of having the neighbor tell me, or somebody else say, I saw it on Facebook. That's really a bad performance. And then afterward, when they said, okay, everything's back on, it should have been followed with, there's a procedure. Once you have a boil water alert and your water shut down, there's a procedure to come back that basically tells you to run your water for about 5 minutes, run through the hot water tank and everything, run your dishwasher through a cycle, run all the water out of your refrigerator. Didn't see anything that coming out. You ought to get somebody in that water department that knows what the hell they're doing, or send somebody back to school, because it was a poor, poor performance. Thank you.
Further comments from the public?
Good evening, Chesterfield Township residents and board members. My name is John Spica, and I reside at 53978 Connor Drive. I'm a homeowner who pays property taxes in the township, and I'm running for supervisor on the November 8th ballot. The supervisor's race, along with the November 8th general election, is 77 days away from today. The residents of Chesterfield Township are going to have to decide who they're going to vote for. A candidate, Spica, who believes in democracy and freedom, who believes in being fiscally responsible, and who always will put Chesterfield first, no matter what. Your second choice is board-appointed candidate Kersten, who I've said many times is an autocrat, doesn't believe in fiscal responsibility, and spends money like we print it in the township, and who caters to the wealthy and well-connected. Two candidates, one ballot with stark differences. My opponent, the board-appointed supervisor, number one priority in this township is to make sure the wealthy and well-connected in and out of Chesterfield are taken care of at the expense of those in this township who are not wealthy and well-connected. An example of this is the $13 million bond issue that the board-appointed supervisor passed over a month ago. Every resident and homeowner got fleeced on this one. The builders and developers made out like bandits, laughing all the way to the bank. What an embarrassment to have 5 naive board members all sitting on one board at the same time. A sewer line on 26 Mile, a handout to the wealthy and well-connected on the backs and sweat of the Chesterfield residents. Now the board-appointed supervisor wants your vote, the same people he just hosed and fleeced. He must think that we are naive. We're not, and we know the game he's playing. Whether you're a registered Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, or undecided voter, I'm a neighbor you can trust and a leader you can count on. In the Speaker administration, it's Chesterfield first. My vision is to make Chesterfield a great place to work and call home for all the residents. In the Speaker administration, checks and balances will return back to that board. I can't stress enough how important it is to have checks and balances on any elected board. Right now, our township board is a 5-2 board, no checks and balances. We have the fox guarding the hen house in Chesterfield, and when that happens, it's a lose-lose for the residents. Another mishandled situation in this township by the board-appointed supervisor was this 120-inch water transmission break that occurred over a week ago. His first real crisis in the township, and he fumbles the ball. Instead of being proactive and getting in front of the crisis, the board-appointed supervisor was reactive and very slow to react to get any information out to the residents. The board-appointed supervisor didn't shut down the splash park when we went into a boil alert. As a matter of fact, the splash park was open all weekend. He wasn't front and center getting Mitch, who was the appointed by the board-appointed supervisor and several board members to be in charge of water and sewer, a promotion I disagreed with and spoke out against on the basis of not having the proper qualifications to run the sewer and water, was MIA that Saturday when the crisis took place in the township. Mitch, who doesn't even have an S1 license, doesn't know how to take water sampling for testing, doesn't understand water distribution, the ins and out of the water department. Putting Mitch in charge of the water and sewer department is equivalent to boarding a plane whose pilot doesn't have a license. Would anybody on this board board that plane? That would be insane. You wouldn't. So the water crisis was mishandled. I've been told this is the second time. I agree with Mr. Kadich. The board-appointed supervisor was slow to get any information out to the residents. Information came slowly. Most of the information came out from the Great Lakes Water Authority. And then on top of everything else, we've got a lot of vulnerable people in this township. Seniors are that. Under a Speaker administration, it would have been hands on deck. There would have been a water distribution center set up here, and bottled water would have been given out to the residents. I would have handled the situation properly. But I was told, and this came from a third party, that our board-appointed supervisor wasn't even in the township. He was in Emmett cutting his grass. So to me, this would be top priority. So, and in reference to that comment, he doesn't own a house in Chesterfield, nor does he pay property taxes in Chesterfield. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
Michelle Wilson Merriweather, 52860 Muirfield Drive. And I would just like to state, to be fair, I'd like to hear both sides. So if possible, when it's time to give a response, if members of the board wouldn't mind just explaining first, why didn't we get an alert? I'd just like to hear both sides. Just why didn't we get an alert? And then secondly, earlier when there was 3 protest letters that were stated, if we could just state why they weren't read, if we could just be fair, I would appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public?
All right, so I wasn't really going to comment on something like this, but knowing it, this is also something I've been working on for a few years. It's sort of the understanding from my backdrop as someone striving for polymathic learning that if we're only going to stick in our lanes for specialization and how we reflect on our experiences and knowledge in explaining things, it really creates an imbalance and especially in the world of politics, where essentially we defer to expertise and knowledge within specialization, mostly in the facet of appointments toward things like leading departments and in specialized fields that we entrust for our expertise. The reality is, between citizenry and elected officials, expertise really means nothing, because oftentimes it is literally just about public opinion. With that being said, Mr. Mink, I don't think Mr. Kadich said anything to defer or to delineate your expertise, and no one called that out, and I think it was very unjust for you to basically say that he was in such an attacking position. But that being said, the board should, the community should recognize that, yes, you have a great expertise, and everyone thanks you for your service. The difference, though, being that if you're going to say things like that, then that would then box you into a corner of saying you can't speak on anything regarding anything outside of law enforcement. That's where it becomes a very difficult position to be in. So the reality is that oftentimes everybody's just spewing out an opinion, and you don't have to respect it, but you have to accept that as it is. And we should defer to expertise, especially if our elected officials do have it in a specialized format, but also come into the acceptance that everyone's going to come up with an opinion, and in that hindsight, that opinion may come from a differing expertise point of view, because not everyone's an expert in everything. Therefore, a person can have experience or knowledge or training or an education in a related topic that can overlay and actually make a person even better. Steel sharpens steel. It is important that we have necessary debates and discussions, because if we're isolated, if we're going through life with blinders on, we end up in a situation of a technocratic elite that will not see fault in their influence, and we see that a lot in places like DC. You can think of no place better for a technocratic elite, and look how much problems come from that region of the country. What I'm basically emphasizing here is the citizenry here, just as the board, everybody has an expertise in something, or perhaps just knowledge that can be discussed. It's important that we all discuss that. Like I said, steel sharpens steel. If you don't, you become weak, you become brittle, you become stale and stagnant. Having lively debate in a formal and cordial manner can create a much, much better debate and ultimately better solutions. But if we're not listening to each other, if we're all just scoffing off that notion, then, well, what are you actually going to learn from anything? Mr. Kadich did bring up important points. I don't agree with them at all, but he needs to be heard because he's a citizen. This is his podium. You guys have a quite literal podium to speak from. As elected officials, you can say things more than what people at the podium can. Use your expertise wisely and your elected position as well. That is why you are there. And everyone else is left only with this as their position. And it's worthwhile to hear them out when they speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? I'll bring it back up to the board. Trustee Demink.
I'm done for the night.
Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Just a comment on the card you received in the mail's been cleaned up pretty well. You know, in the past it kind of came out as could have been misconstrued, and that I think the clerk did a good job on that, just kind of giving the general information. This process has been going back. I first noticed it myself in the mid-'90s on millage night, as far as at that time was for the police millage. So it's nothing new. The letters that were submitted by residents that aren't here were submitted to this board. I do know in the past the names have been mentioned and letters have been read. The decision was made tonight that they are not to be read, that you can, at your convenience, contact the clerk's office to read them. Anyone out there that really feels strongly about it, either pro or against the millage, you always have the voice in the Macomb Daily. You know, utilize that venue. Government, good or bad, should not be conducted in a vacuum. It's great to see you here. I wish, I know, you're looking at what's on cable nowadays, and especially with the Tigers getting near the end of the season. It's a good way to spend a Tuesday night. Come see your elected officials do it here. So I'd like to see you here more often. And finally, we got the last summer-like vacation day coming up here, Labor Day. Everybody be careful and enjoy the remainder of the summer. Thank you.
Trustee Vosper.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Two things. One, the first is that comments made about the water pressure and the boil water advisory. There were many things in place. I'll let the supervisor explain what those are. And the second one is happy birthday to trustee, or I'm sorry, now I'm saying it, sorry, Treasurer Elliott. Thank you.
Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. I appreciate being nervous when you come up to speak, and anytime you have a question about your tax bill or anything, feel free to give us a call at the office, and somebody will be happy to help you out, take a look at that. Ever want any questions, I think, for the finance director as well, if you have any questions about things that you heard here, we'll be happy to help you and direct you to the right person, whether it's myself or the supervisor's office. We'll get you everything that you need. Mr. Kadich had said he doesn't feel sometimes like his voice matters. Mr. Kadich, you've been coming here. I am thinking you have been coming to these meetings every other week or twice a month for 10, 15, how many years? 20 years? About 10 years. And you write letters to the editor, and I have lots and lots of notes. And we always do talk about the things that you say. We always have, not whether it's you or somebody who comes for the first time. Those, for me, I always think about it. Even Mr. Spica, who's run for office several times, ran for office against me, and now is running for supervisor and has run over in Sterling Heights, Utica, I don't know, 6 times run for office. Even you, I have all of your notes and things that you feel and that you express. And but as Mr. Wharton has pointed out tonight, although those are things that we hear and we take into consideration, like he had said, he doesn't agree with Mr. Kadich, and I don't on the public safety issue. I personally do support us having our own police department. I do see the need. I do live I live on the other side of town, so you live off of Jefferson, so you don't have as much traffic. You don't have as much people wandering up and down. I live over in off of Gratiot, and we do have a lot of people wandering up and down. We do have a lot of traffic. We have a lot of things going on over there, so it's probably, my experience is very different. So I do want to thank Trustee Vosberg for wishing me a happy birthday, so I'm going to cut it short because I have an appointment at home with my family to celebrate. Thank you.
Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. With regard to the question of reading the letters in the past, people have expressed to me concern when their names and letters have been made public in the past. So out of consideration for those individuals, it is not required by law for us to disclose those, but they are available under the Freedom of Information Act as well. The purpose for why we receive those letters, and it says in the notice, but just as a reminder that the appearance and protest at this hearing is required in order to appeal the amount of the special assessment to the state tax tribunal if an appeal should be desired. So this is the mechanism by which someone who may want to appeal to the tax tribunal, they need to have these letters into us, and that is why we indicated that we received 3 and that they were done in a timely manner, so that those individuals, should they want to pursue that, have the mechanism in place to do so, and that's the purpose of those letters. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Real quick, some comments that were made tonight in regards to no change in crime stats in the Public Safety Department. That's exactly what we want. No crime here. And we are a low crime rate community, and it's all done by the men and women and employees of the police department. And the goal from any public safety department leader is to keep our crime rate low and no events happening. That's why you don't hear too much about it. And when you do, it's unfortunate, and it's immediately addressed by the police department and, or the fire department. Residents, please don't fall for the politician at the podium that's, I don't even know where he got half his information from. There was no water crisis in Chesterfield. Yes, there was a break. Great Lakes Water Supply, or Great Lakes Water initially did put a water ban in place. It was quickly removed. Our employees were in place within 30 minutes. We have a remote system that monitors the pressure in 5 locations where the water comes into this township through the Great Lakes system. And the concern was if you lose pressure. We were one of the fortunate communities that never lost pressure. We, within minutes and within later that day, I was in communication directly with the county executive, Mark Ackle, County Emergency Management, our own public safety team. They were developing plans, and these plans are in place. There's nothing new to this, but we monitored it. It did not affect our community as much as it did others. But on a side note, we sent crews out. We tested valves. We have 2 connections with the city of New Baltimore. Those valves were tested and made sure that they functioned properly, and they did. We also, with Great Lakes Water, they turned up the pressure at the Rosso entrance, so we were fed from the south. Again, monitoring was consistent, constant throughout the weekend and day, and everything that we did was consistent with the county's demands and Great Lakes Water demands. A water crisis, we were never in a water crisis. Are we prepared for it? We're always prepared for it, and we will continue to be. So please, what you heard tonight at the podium from somebody that wants to run for a seat is just, it's not factual. Beyond that, there's really there's nothing more to go into. So I'll take a motion to adjourn at 8:21.
Motion to adjourn?
Support.
Trustee Demink, Barry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.